The female lead tells women's stories. Remarkable, diverse, inspiring. An educational charity promoting positive female role models who show the many different routes to success and fulfillment.
So often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect and it'll be messy and it'll be hard, but you're doing something and you're on your way.
Empowering future generations of women through films and a book of 60 women donated to 18,000 schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. And through our female lead societies, we help girls to discover new role models that speak to their passions, ambitions and careers. Through our research into social media and mental health, we found a solution to the negative impact of social media on teen girls. Through a simple intervention which encouraged girls to follow different influencers, we were able to change their entire social media experience and sense of well-being. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people on social, with 330 million impressions all over the globe. So what's next? As well as inspiring girls, we're now finding ways to measurably improve the lives of older women through data, research, and the stories of those who have overcome challenges and found their own personal versions of success. We're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to the Female Lead Guide series. Today we're going to be looking at self-promotion. I'm Edwina Dunn, I'm the founder of the Female Lead, and as you've heard, it's a charity which showcases amazing and diverse women. Today I'm joined by the lovely Stefanie Sword Williams. Welcome, Steph. She has written the very headline-grabbing book, F Being Humble. And yes, Steph, I am too scared to say it out loud. I'm going to leave that for you. Steph has progressed from being an advertising account director to author, from event host to radio host, public speaker, content creator, and this year has been named by Forbes in 30 under 30 across Europe. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Your promise in this session and in your book is to help us, number one, craft our own personal story in order to stand out against the crowd. Two, communicate in a truly authentic way. And three, very importantly, build a healthy dose of self-belief. So they sound like three fantastic things to me. If I can just say to everybody out there, welcome. Please do share your questions. I will come to them towards the end of the session and I'll give you a little nudge, but do put them into chat and we'll ask those questions. Great, so let me start. Let me be selfish and start with my questions. So, Steph, I've never personally much liked the word humble, but I've never ever been courageous enough to be quite as dismissive as you have. So my first question, is humble truly a bad thing?
No, and I think, I hope I don't mislead anyone when I have a title like that, you know, of my brand and my book. that actually it's a mindset that I kind of want to encourage people to adopt. So I absolutely do believe that being humble will always have a place in your career, and it's something that is such an admirable quality. But what I don't believe is when somebody is so modest that they let that overtake a potential opportunity. And I think we've all experienced those moments, whether it's in an interview and not selling yourself hard enough, or in a performance review where you should say something a bit bigger or a bit more confident, but you say, no, maybe I shouldn't. Or even in a meeting where you could put yourself forward for something, but actually you go, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. And I think for so long we've been taught that modesty and being humble is the only key to success. And I suppose I really just want to rival that and say, is it? And have you ever questioned why sometimes when you're humble, it doesn't always result in the outcome that you want? And actually, how could we start to challenge that and think in a more proactive and sort of confident way where you put yourself out there more regularly?
You know, I think you make a really important point. I know that, you know, as a leader, when I was, you know, running my own business, dunnhumby, I remember people saying to me, Edwina, you know, when you are modest, when you kind of put yourself down, you actually make us look less, because it looks like we're not high achievers because you're making yourself smaller, more modest. And I thought about it, and I was really shocked by that comment. And actually, it's a really powerful one, and I think it's a really strong one that you've raised. I'm glad you've shared it with us. Now, you've called out it's time for us all to be unapologetically proud of our achievements, and that self-promotion isn't a dirty word. So would you speak to that statement?
Sure. So of my webinars and workshops that I run in order to try and empower people and educate people on this topic, one of the things that I start off all of my sessions by saying is, when you break down what the two words are, self just means I, and promotion is just an activity that supports an aim or a goal. So how that has gained such negative connotations is beyond me. And I think it's really upsetting to see that we live in a culture where we think being self-deprecating or talking ourselves down is cooler than self-promotion itself. And actually, I feel like a bigger education needs to be done on what does self-promotion actually mean? Because when I explain it to people, self-promotion could literally be talking about a project you're working on at the pub with your friends at the weekend. It could also be a business card or an up-to-date LinkedIn or a website. What it absolutely doesn't have to be is standing on a table with a megaphone screaming, how great am I? And actually, it's just about changing our mindset around the methods of self-promotion that we think are that and the only thing that we can do. It really is about storytelling from my perspective. And I think the reason that Foot Being Humble has had such a standout cut through within the market has been because for so long, career coaching has only ever been done in quite a formulaic, stuffy way. Whereas I've come at it using my experience from the advertising industry of storytelling. And when you think of brands like Nike and Adidas and IKEA, every day they promote their products to us, but we don't think they're arrogant and we don't think that they're self-indulgent. Every day we are marketed to. Yet when it comes to doing it ourselves, we feel this really big obstacle and we worry about how others perceive us, when actually we live in a society where every day we are sold ideas to. So why is it that we struggle with doing it for ourselves, particularly when we could gain amazing results or, you know, change our futures? So yeah, I really am on a mission to change the way that people view that. And I think the unapologetic aspect of it is, for so long, and I know particularly for Brits, we are very apologetic for anything that we do in life, but actually we are over hesitant and we fear and we have a big concern over how it might come across or how we might offend people by celebrating ourselves. And I think it's really important that we push past that and see that there are ways of doing it, and how you tell your story is absolutely down to you. So if you're not an arrogant person, then your self-promotion doesn't have to be arrogant.
No, I mean, people bump into me in the street and I say sorry to them. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it kind of gets into your brain, doesn't it? Now, there are lots of great things that you talk about, and I'm not sure we're going to have time to talk about all of them, but I'm going to pick some out, if that's okay. It's a bit of a selfish one for me because they're the ones that I think, I truly believe are kind of common weaknesses. There are two that I want to just point to. One is being confident about laughing at your failures. And then, all the tactics about negotiating salaries and day rates. So two very opposite ones. Which would you like to talk about?
Let's kick off with laughing at failures. I think that's a fun topic.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Did you have any questions, or should I just explain my take on it?
I mean, I think laughter is so powerful, but, your immediate reaction when you've done something wrong is to be hugely embarrassed, isn't it? And I do think it's quite difficult to actually, cope with that moment of embarrassment, but you talk about it being a really powerful moment.
Yeah, I think for me, there's been a lot of work that's been done around failing. So we've seen people like Elizabeth Day do the brilliant podcast and book on how to fail. I think there's the aspect that follows is like how you then linger with that failure, how you live with it, how you let that affect your future or don't let it affect your future. And for me personally, I am somebody that absolutely takes the mick out of all the things that I do when I have done something stupid. And I actually let that become part of my character instead of constantly beating myself up for it. And I think that's one of the things that, in order to let ourselves off from a failure, finding that humorous side is a really good way of doing it. And you absolutely may not be able to do it within the first 2 hours, 2 weeks, whenever it may be. But I explain in the book, set yourself a limit that you will sulk or be upset about that failure, and then try and find ways that you can look at it and think, wow, I can't believe I did X, Y, and Z. And I think some of the examples I give in the book is, I once exhibited at D&AD Festival, a huge creative design festival in London, and I'd spelt my own brand name wrong. And it wasn't hugely dramatic, but I couldn't believe I'd done it, and there was no way that I could change it because it was already going ahead. And I could have stood there the entire time letting it affect me, worrying about whether people would ever speak to me again or trust my brand or believe in what I do. And in reality, no one cared, no one noticed. And I kept those posters and that artwork that had mistakes on, and I put them up at all of my events. And every time I saw them, I laughed because I just thought it's a sign that I'm human, just like everyone else, that things happen. And the things that we obsess over, potentially ruining everything, very often don't. And that's what I really want to get across to people, is that people forget about things so quickly. I talk about it in my networking workshops where I explain to them that actually, if you say something stupid or something wrong, the likelihood that you're going to have to see that person again if you live in a large city is very slim. So get over it and get on with it. It's really not the end of the world. I'm sure most people are worried about what they're saying themselves. And in fact, that goes for any form of self-promotion, that everybody's too bothered thinking about themselves that they're not worrying as much about you as you really think they are. So I think with the laughter and the action, that really helps with progressing and letting yourself off of something that you did 10 years ago, and you shouldn't still be beating yourself up about it, because in reality, nobody else is thinking about it as much as you are.
So I guess conversely, really the heart of the book is, I think, in my interpretation, is really knowing what you stand for, because you've been trained as a brand person. You've developed your skills in advertising. So knowing yourself, standing out, building the confidence around that, that's really at the heart of what you're saying to people. How can you help us sort of think about that and break it down into things that we can practice and do?
And so, first of all, I would say grab a copy of the book, because it is one of those books that I would encourage people to have by their bedside table at any point in their career. But I think in terms of, if you've not been fully trained on brand storytelling and figuring out your purpose, I think first and foremost, a really good question to ask yourself is, why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed every single day to do what you're doing? Why is it that you enjoy it? Was there an early childhood memory that made you want to do something? Is it that there is a lack of representation in a specific industry and that's what really motivates you? Like, what is the thing that you really get that spark and that energy from? And I think when you learn to understand that, you can start to build your narrative around that. So I personally really wanted to create advertising that had a deeper purpose and could change people's lives. And what I did throughout my entire career was constantly search for opportunities or agencies or clients that would allow me to do that. And what I actually eventually realized was I think I needed to start something of my own in order to fulfill that goal and that dream, because I couldn't always control that element of it. But I think with, how you then start to build that story, it's very much about whatever feels most authentic to you. So I explain this to a lot of people. If you absolutely hate the thought of doing an Instagram live or a LinkedIn live, then don't do it. Because ultimately, when you are self-promoting, you want to self-promote the best version of yourself. So if that means writing a blog you would feel more comfortable doing, then become a great blog writer and write articles that bring people in. Or if you are absolutely petrified of public speaking or just generally being in front of a camera, then just don't feel the need to have to do that. I think one of the big issues with self-promotion and storytelling is we beat ourselves up for not being as good as everyone else, but some people are better at certain things than us, and it's okay. It's about finding what you feel good at. And I actually interviewed a range of amazing people that I think are absolutely killing it in the creative industry in the book. And Nicole Krenzel, who is one of the most amazing women I know, she's one of the co-founders of Black Girl Festival. She talked about when she first realized that she really loved public speaking and talking to people and entertaining people and hosting people. Even though she trained up as a product designer and done a completely different degree, she decided to build her entire job around that. And she's gone on to host some amazing panels. She's a face of loads of different brands and working with some incredible people, but mainly because she put what she loved doing at the core of anything that she wanted to offer or anything that she said yes to. And I think for many of us, we take on the education choice that we chose when we were 16 to 18, 21. We go through early and midlife and middle life crises, and then we question, am I too old to change, or do I feel authentic in myself? And the answer is usually no, because we change every year. We change every day, let alone every year. And I think it's important that you reflect that with the story that you put out about yourself. I know I change very regularly, and I think it is just about really monitoring how you want to portray yourself, but also how you feel and how the goals that you're trying to strive towards. But at the kind of forefront of it all should be you showing your best skills in the best possible way, and not necessarily conforming to how everybody else does it. I actually think it's way more exciting when I see people disrupting and doing completely different things to demonstrate how good they are.
Wise words. I like those very much. Now, I'm just going to give people a little prompt and say we have some time coming up very soon for questions, so please do send them in. In the meantime, giving them a little time to think of that question, let's talk about some of your fab hints and tips. And I'm going to read some of them, and then I'm going to pause on a couple. So I loved some of these, like, when did you last Google yourself? That's really good advice. Did you like what you see? I guess goes with that. And then, what is your online profile? Have you adapted that to the person you are, the story you are? And then another one, which, again, I really like, which is about relentless follow-up. Tell me about relentless follow-up. It sounds rather hard work.
Well, it's quite funny that you say the word relentless, because I always make a joke that my boyfriend has said my tombstone will read fucking relentless, because I'm someone that doesn't give up. And although I'm not sure he meant it in a complimentary way, I'm absolutely taking it on board and spin it that he does. But I think what I mean by that is just, it's so easy when we don't hear from people to assume the worst. And that goes for interviews, new business follow-ups, following up on applications. We assume it must be me, I'm awful, I'm never going to get this, and I should just stop trying. When in reality, it could be so many reasons why that person hasn't got back to you. So a few tips I just recommend is try different forms of contact. So if you haven't heard back via email, maybe send them a message on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter. I know somebody who I was trying to connect with, and they were like, oh, I just don't use my email. And I was like, how would I ever have known that? So if I'd have only just followed with that form of contact, then I might have just been disappointed. I think I also give a tip in the book, and when I do my talks, there's a bit of a 3-email follow-up. So you should do your first initial email explaining what you're looking for, a second email follow-up to say, I just wanted to check you received my last message. And then the third message just being like, just wanted to check in one last time to see if this is of interest to you. If not, let's reconnect in a few months' time. And that last email usually prompts people to think, oh no, I will get in touch. And if not, again, it's just important to remember that there are so many reasons why people don't get back in touch. And actually, I've had people who have completely ignored a message of mine and then literally get back 1 year later, 2 years later, and we've ended up working together. So I think always remain quite like a loyal fan to people, and just remember that particularly coming out of a pandemic, there are a whole wealth of reasons of why people may not be answering messages, may not be getting back as soon as they want. But please just don't assume that it's you, because I think as humans, that's what we do. We're very self-critical, and actually it doesn't help anyone, and it absolutely doesn't help your own mental health. So just remember, everybody's struggling, everyone's grinding, working really hard, and you're not the only one who won't be receiving follow-ups right now. You've just got to keep on with that resilience and remember that there's so many reasons why.
Yeah, no, resilience so important at this time. Okay, do we have some questions? Let's have a look. Lovely. Afifa, most people exploit it when you behave humbly. How do you address that? How do you cope with that?
So I think when it comes to being humble, it's such a difficult one, because I think people can go one or two ways, don't they? So people can either be so humble that there's an air of like arrogance in it, because they just assume that if they're quiet and their work will speak for themselves. The other way is that they're not like that, and they drown you with self-promotion, and it's so intense. And I think as long as you have that spectrum of knowing where you want to sit on that dial, that's the most important thing to remember, that actually there's always going to be people are always going to respond to self-promotion in different ways. And what you have to remember is you can't control that. All you can control are your own actions. And you're not always going to please everyone. As you can imagine, when I first launched But Being Humble, I had mixed responses. But if I'd have given up at the first hurdle, then I wouldn't be where I am today, running, a business with global clients, and just written a book and helping thousands of people with their confidence. And I think letting other people dictate your actions is where we end up living in a world of resentment and wishing we'd have done more, wishing we'd have not been affected by those words. And whether it's people putting labels on you, saying you should or shouldn't do this, or whether it's that you've been told to do something a certain way for however long, it's just really important to remember to kind of stay true to yourself. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but just remembering that people's opinions aren't actually going to be the things that help you progress. You taking hold of their opportunities and seizing opportunities is what's going to transform your career and your future. I hope that answers that question.
Brilliant. Phoebe, I hope I pronounced that right. Where is the line between being relentless and nagging? Oh my goodness, we've heard that word, haven't we? Nagging.
It's such a good question, and I think nagging is obviously a word that women in particular would face. I think The reality is it's all about the tone in which you take. And we all know there's things like email etiquette that sometimes, without thinking, you can very quickly just reply to email and say, can I just get an answer on this? But whenever you're writing emails and follow-ups, I think it's easier to follow up verbally and it not come across as nagging, because usually you can use your tone or body language to demonstrate enthusiasm rather than frustration. So I think with emails, it's always really useful to just get somebody else to double check, have I got this tone right? Do I sound at all a little bit naggy? And I would just try and put a limit in terms of timing. So try not to follow up 3 times in 1 week. Try to give the person, at least a week between each time you follow up, or just within the first follow up, ask when would be best to get back in touch, because actually a lot of the time we forget to ask that as a very simple question, which will, one, help you from constantly threatening whether they're going to get back to you, but also just at least by letting them set a timings, or letting them to say, actually get back in 2 weeks time and we'll have a better answer. Then when you follow up, it isn't about nagging, you're just following up on the timescales they gave you. So try and ask for or encourage some sort of timeline indication so that you can go back without feeling too intrusive, would be my advice.
Great. Okay, Lucia, how do we stop being humble when asking for a salary rise? There's the big question.
First of all, I'd absolutely encourage you to check out Cindy Gallop. She's one of the icons in the creative industry and absolutely a huge inspiration to being humble as a message. But what I would say is I think preparation is key. Before any form of self-promotion, before any form of negotiation, you first have to believe that you are worth the money that you're asking for, because when you're not, it absolutely shows. I think we use phrases like, shall we avoid the elephant in the room and discuss the money? And the minute you say a phrase like that, you are putting an elephant in the room. So don't say that, stop saying it. I think also when you go in with a figure or a salary, I would encourage you to, if you're going for a new job, I'd encourage you to ask for a bracket. So I'm looking between X and X, and that lower part of the bracket should be the lowest you're willing to accept, so that you are adding a substantial amount of a salary on the other side. But also it's allowing them to choose where they want to pick a salary on that spectrum again. And then I also think it's very much about body language again and tone. And one thing that I think British people in particular, and I know I can be quite bad for, is over rambling to justify a point. And actually one of the things I encourage people to do during my Bitch Better Have My Money workshop that I run is say a figure or say your request and then make an awkward silence. You don't need to fill that. That is up to your employer or the person that is giving you the finance for them to then respond. Don't say a number and then overly justify it or offer to reduce that figure if they do something. Say a number and make an awkward silence. Always remain eye contact. Try and be as composed as you can. But the best way to do that is by having a load of notes that you've got, and you can take notes into pay reviews or into negotiation situations. It doesn't make you look weak or vulnerable. It actually just means if you stumble or if you feel nervous, you have something with you to support you. So yeah, I think preparation amongst any form of self-promotion is the most important. And actually Cindy Gallop says that you should say whatever number you think you can get away with saying without laughing at yourself. So that would be a tip from her, from me to you. But yeah, definitely you have to believe in yourself first before they will believe in you.
That silence that you've just talked about has been one of the most powerful things I ever learned. I could not agree with you more. The desire to leap in and say something that's more acceptable is almost irresistible. But if you can hold on and keep quiet, it's magic. I completely agree. Final question. How do we celebrate our achievements and show ourselves kindness if things don't go well?
This is such a great question, and I'm really glad it's come up today. So one of the things that I talk to a lot of people about is the importance of talking to others about your successes. So during lockdown, me and a few other of my freelancer friends started a WhatsApp group where we just ask questions when we're struggling. And I also instigated that we do weekly voice notes where we verbalize one thing we're proud of and send it to each other. And I think the power in that is that you don't just write something down, you actually have to say it. And by saying it, you practice delivering that and actually sharing it about yourself. But when you are feeling down, I've been through it myself. It can be so difficult when people ask you, oh, what are you proud of? And you think, well, actually nothing, which is why it's so important to keep some form of an iPhone note section or a little black book where you write down small and big wins, whether it's getting over a difficult conversation with a client or it's having a really good pitch at work. Make sure you're constantly documenting any of the successes that you have, because that is evidence that will block out imposter syndrome the next time it creeps in and tells you you can't do something. And then finally, don't always let that responsibility sit with you. So go ask your partners, your friends, your peers, your ex-colleagues, your bosses, you know, when was a time you really enjoyed working with me? Or if you were going to describe me in 5 words, how would you do it? Or what do you think you're proudest of me that I've achieved? And why do you think that? And actually let them do the hard work for you, because sometimes you just need somebody to spark that imagination, remind you that you have done loads of things. And what I always say to people is that I think the secret sauce to believing in yourself and celebrating your achievements is, one, taking pride in what you do, and also just accepting compliments. So I think we're really bad at rejecting them. If somebody says you've done a good job, it's like, actually say thank you. It was really hard. I appreciate that you said that. And I'm really grateful of that. And when you combine that with taking pride, which is going down to the pub and talking about something you've achieved, or telling your partner at home, oh, I'm really happy I did this, you start to become way more comfortable with sort of admiring yourself and what you're capable of. And by speaking it, I really do encourage the verbal aspect of it, because I think very often we've got so many things going on in our mind that it's really easy for us to forget, or for our mind to be consumed by other topics, that actually we don't give ourselves enough credit for the achievements that we end up having.
Very good advice. I love what you've just said there. So I think that's the end. It's gone so quickly. It's been lovely. I've enjoyed it. Steph, you're amazing. Your book,
Yes, of
Being Humble. You can say it if you like, but there you go. It's very good, and you've shared some wonderful things with us. So thank you so much. And for everyone out there who wants more of Steph, that's where you find it, or online. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you've taken out of it some really good things. Our next LinkedIn Live is on the 15th of October, and it's with the really lovely, smart Dr. Sarah Wood, entrepreneur, founder of Unruly, and author of a great leadership book, Stepping Up. All-round great person, just like Steph. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.